The story opens with Lick Esterk and his mother, who looked disgusted and told him he was an abomination to the family, could not use magic, and did not deserve the Esterk name. So she said that tomorrow, when he turned 15, he would be exiled from the family. Ellen, his sister, standing beside him, spoke up for him and asked her what she meant by that. The mother made it clear he would be cast out of the family now, that a useless boy like him had turned 15, and there was no reason to keep him there. Ellen argued she should not do that, since other brothers were still in the house. Most importantly, Licht was still her brother, but her mother reminded her not to call that boy her brother because he was not her real brother. He was the son of a miller's daughter. Nearby, two maids were enjoying the family drama. Ellen stared at them with cold eyes and silenced them, then returned to her point that even if he was an illegitimate child, he still shared her father's royal blood. Her mother agreed she was right, and only for that reason decided to hold a proper exile ceremony for him as a final act of mercy. For ages, the nobles have upheld the ceremony as a tradition. Because the Esterk family was a noble line that founded the kingdom, they had held this ceremony 5 times before to prevent inferior heirs, so 5 others had been exiled from the family before him. If Lake still wanted to stay in the house, he had to pass the exile ceremony and prove he was worthy of the Esterg name. Helen grew more frustrated, but he stopped her from saying anything hurtful to her mother and accepted her proposal. After that, the two left the hall, and the mother disliked his usual unpleasant attitude, and the butler came up to her and asked if it was right for her to make such an important decision while the master was away from the mansion. She replied that she was doing it precisely because the master was not there. Meanwhile, Hélène stomped through the hallways, frustrated, yelling that she absolutely hated her mother. Licht, however, only smiled and told her she should not speak ill of her mother like that. She asked why he accepted her proposal without replying, and he explained that bastards like him were often thrown out when they came of age and that he felt useless and was tarnishing their family's name. Suddenly, Alan hugged him, and she began to cry as she asked if he was really okay with them being separated like this. Smiling, he patted her head and said she hadn't changed at all after all this time. She disagreed and said she had changed, and more importantly, he had changed even more. She asked him if he still remembered the day he first showed her his magic. Everyone insisted he could not use magic, but when she saw him use it, she was stunned. Lit tried to cover it up by saying she had simply misunderstood. She remained absolutely sure she was not mistaken, because even after all this time, the memory felt as fresh as yesterday. It had been the day that changed her life forever. Cut to a flashback. Back when they were both just kids, Hélène lost to him, and it was hard to accept since everyone had called him a useless abomination. Seeing she was bleeding a little, he tried to help, but she shouted and told him not to touch her. First, he apologized to her and made clear he never meant to hurt her. She was only trying to vent her frustration and picked that useless kid everyone looked down on as a punching bag, but he countered her, and she felt so ashamed of her foolish actions that she cried in public for the first time. Lit stepped in to calm her and then used his magic in front of her. He made every flower around her fly up, leaving her completely surprised, but that was not all. He scattered the flower petals over her drawers to make them look like they were made of flowers. A dress made of flowers amazed her, and he said the real beauty was her, not the flowers. Back in the present, she said she had admired him a lot since that day, and he stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to say to that. Curious, she wanted to know why he hid his true power despite being able to use such powerful magic and having sword skills unmatched even among the other Esterk brothers, and why he always pretended to be useless. Lit replied by asking how old she was turning this year, which left her a bit confused. He mentioned she was reaching an age when marriage proposals would start. He wanted her to simply forget the person about to leave this house and believed she would quickly find someone new. However, in a serious tone, she asked him why he would say something like that, and he was taken aback. Tears filled her eyes as she said he was being too cruel. They ran away from there, while he had no idea what had just happened. Her expression surprised him and made him realize he still had these feelings after all this time. Even so, though they shared the Esterk name, he knew exactly how different they were, and while it made him feel bad, he accepted that it was for the best. The fact remained that they had lived in very different worlds from the start. The next day, the action moved to the Esterk family's training grounds. In the waiting room, a kid sat alone holding a locket with a picture of his real mother. At that moment, someone knocked on his door and asked to be let in. Hélène was there, and he said he was glad to see her face there one last time. Assuming she was still angry with him about what happened the other day, he watched her look around the room and say it felt like a prison where people wait to pass away. She then confronted him and asked if he had deliberately planned today's test too. That was because since yesterday he'd been talking like he'd already decided to leave the house no matter what. Then she took off his shirt and he, confused, asked her what she was trying to do there. She replied that incest was common in the ancient story of Esther. He cut her off and reminded her it was only an old tale and was now forbidden by family rules. She smiled at him and said he was an amazing person, and from how he looked she could tell he'd been training hard. She knew it too because she had spent more time with him than anyone else. She was convinced he was meant to carry on the esoteric legacy. Lick chuckled again because she had said it before, and he brushed it off as usual. He said he had no right to inherit even as a noble, but she insisted he did and pointed to the proof right there. Born with the Esturk family crest etched on his shoulder. She showed him her emblem and told him it was the mark of a legitimate Esther, which explained why their mother had not cast him out all this time, since he wore the emblem too. Turning around, she asked him to stop this stupid act just for today. Silent, he made it clear he would not listen to her, and she could not understand why he pretended to be helpless when he was not, but she was sure she did not want to be apart from him. Determined not to let her mother have her way, she decided to do everything she could. Meanwhile, everyone else had gathered on the training grounds, and the second son, Marcus von Esturk, threw his wine at the butler, losing patience and demanding to know when it would start. Frodo von Esturk, the eldest son, pointed out that it was almost 11 o'clock and it should start soon. Their mother, Nenerva von Esturk, giggled, unable to wait to see what would happen. At that moment, Elen arrived, and her mother was surprised because she had thought Elen would not come. Apologizing to her mother and brother for being late, she said she had been preparing a little something to keep everyone from being bored during the trial. Her mother grew suspicious and wondered what that might be. At last, Lick could step outside. He held the locket in his hand once more. Determined he would face the arrogant nobles who had mocked and belittled him and his brother, but more than anything. Determined to take his revenge on the Esturks, he finally stepped into the ring. When he stepped outside, everyone in the arena looked down on him and called him Laura Stark's illegitimate son, saying he did not deserve a noble title. In the end, they saw him as nothing more than an ordinary commoner like everyone else. Lick stood there watching the huge crowd that had gathered, surprised at how big his Exile trial had become after they invited more than just the Stark family and his loyal retainers. Noticing that even the serfs' children were there, he realized Manuva truly wanted to publicly announce his exile. Minerva ordered the Exile trial to begin and told him his test would be simple. It was meant to prove whether he was worthy of the martial house of Astark. At that moment, a dwarf and a troll stood before him. She repeated that his trial would be settled by a duel, offered him the choice of any opponent, and Lake lifted his finger in response. He pointed at his brother and said he wanted to duel him. Marcus grew furious and shouted that a commoner who couldn't even use magic shouldn't dare challenge royalty like him. Looking at his mother, he hoped she would say something too, but she just giggled and seemed curious about what he planned by choosing such a difficult path. To find out, she told Marcus to show that bastard what it meant to be a Stark man, and he obeyed without arguing. He was ready to beat him so badly he would beg for mercy. Spectators murmured that the Estark family had always produced the chief court magicians, and now a commoner who couldn't even use magic was going to fight in Estark. People were certain the match's outcome had been decided before the fight even began. Marcus stepped into the ring and mocked Lit for making such a foolish decision, saying that if Lit had fought a dwarf or a troll he might have stood a chance, but instead he went out of his way to challenge him, and he doubted Lit even understood what a duel with nobility meant. In the kingdom of Raklis, the nobles wielded far greater magic than ordinary people. That's exactly why a fight against a nobleman would involve magic, which Lick could not use at all. Marcus told him to pick his weapon carefully for the duel to make up for his lack of magic. Lick noticed his brother would use a sword. Ready to use the same weapon, he was about to choose when Ellen stepped in and asked him to wait. She told him she had prepared a weapon just for him, and a man stepped forward carrying a massive sword and held it before him. It was none other than the divine sword Turfing. He could barely hold it because it was that heavy, and Aelin announced she had a proposal for everyone in the arena, wanting a short prelude before the duel between the two brothers began. The divine sword Turfing was an important heirloom of the Estark family for generations, said to be a sacred blade from another world in mythic times. Anyone without magic could not even touch the sword, so if Lick really had no magic, he could not touch it either. For the traditional Exile trial's prelude, she wanted to let the one everyone called useless try. Minerva began to wonder what she hoped to prove by doing something so unnecessary, while Elin apologized to him in her mind for doing it. Because he planned to lose the duel on purpose, she wanted him to show everyone he truly had magic to increase his chances of staying in the mansion. Seeing Lick do nothing, Marcus grabbed the divine sword and told Lick that, despite carrying their father's blood, he must not touch it because only true nobles like Marcus could touch it. He picked up the sword and kept insisting that a commoner like him had no right to even touch it. Some people had been able to pull the sword and use it, but they were no longer in this world, and even their father, known as the prodigy of the Estarks, could not pull it. One day Marcus was certain he would claim this sword for himself. At that moment the sword resisted him and sent him flying back. Marcus chuckled, knowing making the sword his own would not be easy, and in fact it was almost impossible since only one person in history had ever pulled it out, Brahms, the first head of the Astarks. A stubborn sword refused to let anyone use it except the first head, even though it lay right at Lick's feet. Not wanting to hold it, he decided to wrap up the prelude right there and went back to choosing his weapon, while Marcus remarked that he was dull and boring. Manuva felt a little let down, since she had hoped to see something interesting from him for the first time, while Aileen was beginning to worry about him. Shouting, she told him to just take the divine sword, confident he could touch it. He only looked at her, feeling grateful she wanted to help and stay in the family, but he knew he could not meet her expectations. He had already decided to take down Marcus right then and there, refused to lose the duel with his brother, and by winning, he would leave the house anyway. Menarov set the rules, telling them the duel would continue until one side admitted defeat or could no longer fight. With that, the duel finally began. Marcus charges first and casts a fire spell. He launched a fireball spell straight at him. Lake stood frozen as a fireball came toward him, and Minerva enjoyed the show when all of a sudden, his sword sliced the fireball as if it were nothing, leaving everyone in the arena stunned. They could hardly believe he had sliced the spell with his sword since they did not think that was possible, and it was even more shocking because he was only a commoner who could not use magic, so Marcus asked what tricks he was using. He replied simply that not realizing what was happening was exactly why he had been so foolish. To make it simple for him to understand, he said he was just stronger than him. That's it. Marcus was furious, but before he could even understand it all, Lake vanished from his sight. In an instant, he closed in and struck him with a fireball spell as well. Reminding him the spell worked best at close range, he sent him flying back, leaving everyone shocked again. Confused, Marcus had no idea what was happening or how he could cast magic without an incantation, and Lick reassured him he didn't need to worry because he wouldn't kill him. His goal was to humiliate him before the crowd, knowing a proud noble would find losing to a commoner more painful than death. He thought it was still much lighter than the suffering his mother had to bear because of them all. He pointed his sword at him and said that if he admitted defeat then he would not hurt him further. Although he hated him, he did not want his sister to be sad, and only for that reason he was willing to show him mercy. Just then Ellen called him out. He was warned to watch out as the troll moved to attack from behind, and Lit managed to block it just in time. Minerva shouted to Marcus, urging him to take the chance and counterattack while Lick's back was exposed, her eyes cold and murderous as she wanted to see him dead. Busy fending off the troll's attack, Marcus also could not accept losing to a commoner. Then he grabbed his sword and moved to strike him from behind. However, Lick turned and tried to attack him with magic to knock him out for a moment. A dwarf stepped in and grabbed his arm, throwing off his aim, and Marcus took the chance to close in quickly. Then slash him with his sword. It left everyone stunned and speechless. Both the dwarf and the troll stepped back as blue dripped from his body onto the ground, and near his feet lay the divine sword that had just dropped there. Marcus admitted he was right, and that losing to a commoner was more painful than losing to death, so he decided to kill him on the spot, and did not care if the man blamed him or called him a coward. Ellen begged her mother to stop Marcus, but her mother had clearly been waiting for this exact moment and even encouraged him to finish him off. Lick dropped his sword and stood still, waiting to die. Marcus was confused and asked whether he truly believed he would not hit an unarmed person. He told him this was his fault for losing his fighting spirit in the middle of battle and said he should blame his own ineptitude, while the Len shouted from afar, urging him not to give up so easily. Tears in her eyes, she asked him to pick up the sword. Suddenly, the divine sword moved on its own. It landed right in Lick's hand by itself. The sword spoke to him and said it was not his time to die yet. Spectators were stunned and could not understand how a commoner who could not use magic was touching the divine sword. Minerva was just as shocked because the divine sword had flown into his hands on its own, while Elen was simply relieved, and Marcus again demanded to know what trick he was using, since he should not even be able to touch the divine sword. Growing angry, he demanded an answer, but the other man was as surprised as everyone else. The sword kept talking to him, saying the man in front of them was annoying, and she looked at him and remembered the saying that the weak bark the loudest, and he was a perfect example. She demanded to know why Licht had dropped his sword, and whether he was really going to lose to such a pathetic man. A blue aura still clung to the divine sword, and she felt a strong magic in his blood, which made her doubt that an ordinary warrior could have defeated him like that. He said he would not let himself lose to Marcus. In truth, he felt defeated by the world. Lineage and background alone decided a person's future, so personal talent meant nothing. Like his mother, he believed one person could not change fate. This world was far too complex and cruel for that. All this time he believed that to defeat them, he had to be as vile as the ugly nobles in front of him, so he acted useless to avoid their attention, and now he was tired of pretending and lying to himself. Marcus heard this and stood there confused, asking why Lit was talking to himself. Lit was taken aback and wondered if Marcus actually could not hear the divine sword, and the sword said Marcus could not. In fact, no one there could hear her, and she added that others had wielded the divine sword in the past, but no one heard that she had survived. She reminded him of his earlier claim that one person could not change fate, and asked whether he still believed that now that she was with him, saying she would not stop him if he chose to die, though she could still feel his blood burning with life. So she asked him if he was really okay with losing like that without even trying to change anything. The divine sword could already sense the true feelings inside him. With that, Licht was ready to use that sword. Seeing his eyes revealed his motivation, so she asked him to use her as he wished. At last he drew the divine sword, an act no one had managed in a very long time. Everyone was stunned. Marcus trembled, unable to accept what he saw and telling himself it had to be a bad dream, while Maneuver and the others stood frozen as well. Lake raised the divine sword in front of everyone. Spectators murmured that only the family's first head had ever drawn the divine sword, and they were left asking who this young man before them was. Light poured from the sword, making the dwarf tremble, and Marcus wondered if the beasts feared the divine sword's glow. Meanwhile, Minerva panicked and asked her butler why this was happening, since they'd already confirmed Lick had no magical power. The butler brought out the magic scanner and first checked Marcus, whose magic level was 3333. Then he tested Litz's magic and couldn't believe what he saw. His powers kept growing far beyond what he expected, until eventually. Licht's magical power read 7777. Maneuver refused to believe it because she had never heard of such magical powers, while Eilon remained in her mind. She apologized to him ahead of time because she knew what she was about to do would really annoy him. Calling to the crowd in the arena, she told everyone they were witnessing a historic moment unfolding before their eyes, the return of a hero. She branded Licht as Stark, their real hero. People all agreed with her and hailed him as a national hero, while he stood there growing increasingly annoyed. He decided to leave, but as he was going back, Marcus called him out, saying he would not let him walk home quietly during a duel after whatever trick he used to draw the divine sword. Then Licht turned and fixed him with a deadly stare. Marcus froze for a moment, said he would disappear from there as they all wanted, and warned him that if anyone even tried to follow him. Showing no mercy, he cut them down with the divine sword, then left the ring and returned. Walking back, he was still bleeding from his wound. Just as he reached the exit, he thought he could finally be free, but began to lose consciousness while the divine sword asked if he was all right. He admitted he had not expected the duel to end this way. He had only meant to humiliate the heir of a Stark, and being seriously wounded was not part of his plan. Looking up at the sky, he wondered whether he could somehow avenge his mother's grudge. Falling to the ground, he slowly passed out and felt like he was lying in his mother's lap while she called out to him. In reality, Elen told him not to die and called for anyone to come help her brother. Waking up in his room, he found Elon sitting in a chair beside him. The divine sword was there in his room, and she was happy to see he had finally woken, telling him he had been out cold for 3 days. She officially called him her new master. Licht asked if all divine swords could speak and noted that, for a sword thousands of years old, her voice sounded surprisingly young. She reminded him she was not just any sword, that her magnificent name was Turfing, and that it was bad manners to ask a lady her age. She added that while he was passed out, Elen had been the one taking care of him. She told him to thank her because she had stayed by his side and protected him. He smiled and patted Elin's head. All the divine sword became very intrigued when they saw that look on his face. She admitted growing increasingly curious about him. What began as interest in his warrior blood had turned into a desire to see what kind of man he would become. She then asked him if he still planned to leave this place. He said he would, since he no longer had any reason to stay, and Loki understood Island would be lonely without him. It was something he had to do, and he promised to keep writing her once he settled down somewhere. Because of that, Herfing asked him to take her with him. Lact hesitated because she was still the treasure of SD Arc, and he was sure they would not let this pass easily. She then told him what had happened after he lost consciousness. All who were in the arena said he was now the true owner of the divine sword, and no matter how much the nobles tried to hush it, they couldn't completely silence the people. Everyone already knew the divine sword chose its own owner, and not even the king could change that, so now that everyone had seen him hold it, she told him he did not need to worry, and that he would not be bored with her around. He agreed that was true and said so. He took her with him, hoping they could work together as true partners. From that day he abandoned the Stark name and went out into the world to face many powerful enemies, the divine sword at his side. Cutting ties with those he once held close, he moved forward to forge his own path. People began calling him the strongest, undefeated wielder of the divine sword. A few days had passed since that incident, and the scene shifted to the shared carriage ticket booth just northwest of the Stark mansion, where a commotion was underway. The receptionists told the two women who had come to him for help that they should have taken care of their valuables themselves, but one of them slammed the desk, said there was a disturbance at the stable, and demanded that he investigate immediately. He reminded them this was not a social venue in the royal capital, where their belongings would be safe if left, and that they had been far too casual about parting with their valuables. They must be very well bred, he said. The other young woman with her seemed a little shy and told Marie to calm down for now. Admitting the shopkeeper was right, she said they had mismanaged things and had to treat this as an expensive lesson, and Marie did not argue but felt bad that her careless actions would leave her lady hungry for a while, though she did not mind. The young lady called out to everyone and bowed. Sincerely apologized to everyone for taking up their time and making them wait in line. The men were no longer angry with them and even felt sorry for them when they saw how unlucky they had been. As they were about to leave, she checked her pockets and was shocked to find she had lost something again. It turned out she had lost the shared carriage ticket they had bought. They turned to the shopkeeper for help, but he refused to listen and told them to leave. They had no idea what to do next because the heavy rain had washed away the bridge, and the only route to the northern town by mountain carriage was no longer an option. The young lady thought about just walking on when a man suddenly approached them, and Marie stepped in front of her because she did not know his intentions. Even the divine sword Turfing was surprised at how quick her reactions were, given she was just a maid. He asked if they were willing to let the thief get away, and they said they could not carry out a body search because only the city guard was authorized to do that. The young woman noticed he was quietly chanting a spell. Suddenly he cast a spell that bewildered them both because it was their first time seeing anything like it. He explained it was an original spell he had created by combining transparency and metal detection, leaving Marie even more baffled. She turned to her princess and asked whether transparency magic really existed, and if it did, how much it would let them see. She admitted it was her first time hearing about that kind of spell, so she wasn't sure how it worked. Meanwhile, Licht scanned everyone in the room until he found the person he'd been looking for. The thief who had stolen from them sat right there and pointed at the man with the red nose. The man insisted he wasn't a thief and was only talking rubbish, but Lit told him there was no point in making any more excuses. He saw he had an unreasonable number of gold coins in his pocket. The man kept denying the accusations and said he was only making it all up. He smiled and said that, although he looked like just a swordsman, he could use magic too. To prove he was not lying, he told him his underwear at that moment was covered in hearts and roses. He invited everyone to check for themselves whether he was lying, and they all began saying they should go check it out. The man refused to listen to the baseless accusations and began to leave when Lick tried to stop him. Becoming defensive and warning Lick, he would report any attempt at violence to the city guard. Unaware his pants were already down, he didn't realize until Lick warned him not to go to the city guard looking so ridiculous, and to make matters worse his underwear was exactly as he had described. Everyone laughed at him. They mocked him for forgetting to fasten his belt, but Marie knew exactly what had happened. She herself saw, for a brief moment, how Lick moved with incredible speed and cut the belt with a dagger. That alone convinced her he had serious skill with a sword as he checked the man's pockets. Finding a pouch full of gold coins confirmed it was exactly what she was looking for. The thief kept making excuses, saying he had inherited the money from an uncle who had just died, and since gold coins have no names on them, he dared them to prove the pouch belonged to them. Marie shouted the pouch contained 7 gold coins and 24 silver coins, with 3 of the silver coins half broken, so Lick decided to check if Marie was right. She was right, and that proved the man in front of them was a thief. After he fell, he started talking to himself, since this was supposed to be an easy job. The group proved different from what he had heard. While Marie and the young lady celebrated because they finally got their things back. Then the princess noticed Lit leading the shop and wanted to follow him. Marie had some things to take care of in the shop, so she asked her to stay there for a moment while she went to finish the preparations. Outside, Lick sat under the tree while the divine sword asked if he was trying to look cool by leaving without even introducing himself to the women. Putting that aside, she wondered why he had helped since she thought he was indifferent to others, and he said he had not meant to help at first, but seeing the young Princess Beau and apologized to everyone for causing trouble caught his attention. At that moment, 2 women came up to him and thanked him for helping them back there. The princess asked Marie to hand it to him, and though Marie seemed reluctant, she gave him a pouch of coins to reward him for helping the young lady get her belongings back. Turfing also wanted to know how much money that amounted to. He told her there were 5 gold coins in the pouch, which surprised her, and added that they were giving him far too much money, since 5 coins could cover a commoner's food for a whole year. Agreeing with him, she couldn't do anything because the princess insisted she reward him with 5 gold coins, and the young lady said no one at the stable would help except him, so she felt it was only right to repay his kindness. Lick acted modestly and said it was just a coincidence he was there then, but she disagreed and called him a very honorable person, and both she and Marie were moved by his actions, so because he was such an honorable traveler, she had one more thing to ask him. She asked him to accompany them for a while and help them reach the northern town. He was a little taken aback, and even Marie herself was surprised to hear it from her. She assured the young lady they did not need anyone else and that she was more than enough to protect her, but the princess said she had been struggling lately and looked tired because the usual Marie would not have let a thief steal from her. Marie said they still could not trust people with uncertain backgrounds, even though he seemed very capable, and then she looked at his innocent face and began second-guessing what she'd just said. Licked, by contrast, chuckled and admitted that he had thought she was just another well-bred noble doubler, but she was actually a clever strategist. She had first given him a handsome reward. Accepting such a large sum would leave him unable to refuse anything she asked of him next. The princess kept pretending not to understand and said she had no idea what he meant, confident in her judgment of people and sure he would not be swayed by a large reward, but he admitted that extra travel money was never a bad thing and agreed to her request. Introducing himself to both of them, he finally agreed to take the role in their company. She wanted to introduce herself but felt hesitant, and he noticed and reassured her that using a false name was fine since their relationship would only last until they reached the northern town. At last, the princess took off her hood and introduced herself as Ria. The two shook hands to seal the deal, while Marie felt uncomfortable and told him not to touch the young woman so casually. A group of men watched from a distance. Their leader was slightly surprised that a traveler had joined the 2 women, but he still wanted to complete his mission. He ordered his men that if the boy stood in the way of their plan, they could get rid of him. Later, the 3 climbed into a shared carriage and headed for the northern town, and Licht was enjoying the view outside when Ria giggled and said he looked like a child again as he stared out the window. Marie T. Similittle, as if he were a child who had never ridden before, admitted without hesitation that this was his first time riding in a carriage, since his brothers always looked down on it as a beast ride. He was really enjoying the unfamiliar sights as he bumped along with them. Ria was simply happy to hear that, and Marie told him he was free to enjoy himself, but also had to earn his keep. Her sole focus was protecting the young lady, and she told him not to forget that, which he fully understood. He told them both he had already checked the 10 passengers in that carriage and found none had brought any dangerous items. Each carriage also had a guard on board, so he told them they did not need to worry so much. He did not know that outside a guard had already been taken out, and a mysterious, well-dressed man was now driving the carriage. Back inside, an old woman offered them some frozen food she had and said it was delicious. Marie, the logical one, refused because the old woman was a stranger and they could not be sure what was in the food, while Licht accepted it and began to eat. She scolded him for being reckless, warning that if he got sick after eating it, he would only be a liability for them, and to quiet her for a moment, he shoved some of the food into her mouth as well. He told her to relax and said he could spot any poison easily because he had been careful about it his whole life, which made her wonder what his childhood had been like. Then he asked Rhea if she wanted some, and she gladly accepted. She could hardly believe how delicious it was and liked it a lot. The old lady saw him and Rhea and asked if they were a couple. Rhea became angry and was about to deny it, but Lick interrupted and said they were. Rhea froze, too surprised to speak. Marie then asked him what he meant by saying something so bizarre. She overheard two men saying they were after her too, but now that she had a boyfriend they stood no chance. Lick told them both that if they roleplayed like this, no man would try to approach Rhea until they reached the northern town, and he added that this was a trick his sister often used to protect him, which made them both agree he was right. At that moment the carriage stopped and everyone wondered what had happened. A man started banging on the window and asked the driver what was going on outside. The window opened, and then something happened. The man's throat was cut, leaving everyone stunned. They panicked and ran outside while Licht warned them not to rush out like that, but it was already too late. As everyone came out, a man was waiting outside, and amid their screams, he quickly asked Marie to stay by Rhea's side and protect her. Not knowing how many bandits were around left them at a serious disadvantage, but he still decided to check outside. Rhea noticed the old woman with them, and after the man died she began crying and trembling in fear, so Rhea hugged her as the woman apologized because deep down she believed it was her fault. He looked outside and saw everyone who had run out lying dead on the ground. The man called to Rhea, whose real name was Arya Rose, and told her to come with them quietly, saying they did not mean to kill her and that the killing was unnecessary. He threatened that if she resisted, more people would die, so the choice was hers. Mary told her she must not go out there no matter what, while Licht simply asked what she wanted to do. The young princess said she refused to let anyone else die because of her, but he replied that her resolve was pointless and that even if she went out there, it would not change the outcome. Seeing the man outside convinced him they planned to kill everyone there. Their aim was to kidnap the princess and leave no witnesses alive. With no real choice, Lit stepped outside alone and said they were very bold to think they could kidnap the princess that easily. He asked the group's leader who their employer was, but the leader refused to answer. At that moment, another man crept up behind him and tried to attack him. Lick stood motionless when, out of nowhere, vines grabbed that man's arm and pinned him to the ground so he could not move. Returning to the leader, he asked how many of them were present, still shocked at how easily he could use binding magic. Licht was surprised to find they knew some magic, so he figured they were not ordinary bandits. Charging a fireball, he ran straight at the leader, refusing to back down from close combat as the bandit drew two blades to counterattack. Shocked, the blade went right through him, and he realized it was only a mirage. The real Licht was right behind him, and before the leader could fully turn, it hit him with a fireball. That had no effect on him, and the leader mocked him, saying he could not be taken down by that level of firepower, leaving Licht completely shocked. Inside the carriage, Marie watched them and could not understand why he hesitated, so she shouted that he had to fight with the intent to kill or he would die. The leader agreed with her and praised Lick for his skills, but a fundamental difference remained between him and the rest of his group, who suddenly appeared and surrounded him on all sides. The difference, he said, was that everyone was willing to pay any price to reach their goal, and the man bound by magic proved it by cutting off the hand that pinned him to the vines. With only one hand left, the man ran straight toward the carriage to get out of the area. Marie would not let that happen, and before he could reach her, she threw a knife at him and knocked him down. The leader realized she was not a mere maid, but the princess's bodyguard, so he chose to handle her personally and ordered his men to deal with Licht. Suddenly, Lit drew his divine sword and took them all out in the blink of an eye. Before the leader could even grasp what had happened, he swung his sword at him among those foes. The impact tore off his clothes and shoved him back, and he could not believe he had taken down 4 of his men with a single swing of his sword, which seemed impossible. Frozen, he stood completely defenseless. Marie said this was beyond what ordinary humans could do, and she asked Arya if she knew what the sword was. She knew it at once and realized Licht was one of the world's few divine sword users. Rumor said the divine sword could slice rock and iron like cloth, and now seeing it in action he was relieved it lived up to the legend. Turfing took it personally and told him he was wrong to think her powers would rust after a few centuries of rest. A divine sword needed no maintenance, and nothing could escape her blade. Except that he had left one alive in front of him, she praised his skill in igniting the divine sword and wanted him to show everyone his true power. Charging forward, he attacked the leader and tried to block the attack with his blade. It snapped back, and though he took only one slash, the bones in his finger were already shattered. If he was hit by another one of his attacks, it would be the end of him. He tried to fight back, but it was too late and the divine sword cut him. The leader was cut in two and died on the spot. Surrounded by Lit stood tall while Turfing asked him if he was all right. Miri stepped up and praised him for doing well. She had assumed he was a novice but was surprised he could handle himself. Reading his expression, she asked whether this was his first time killing someone, and he confirmed it was. He looked around, smiled, and reassured her that nothing suspicious was nearby and they would be safe for a while. So she no longer had to be afraid, but she still felt very sorry for him. Putting her hand on his chest, she could tell, however, how much she longed for peace and quiet. Talent like his wouldn't let him have that. Noticing the look on her face, he asked what she meant, but she stayed silent. Despite that, some survivors remained, and he urged everyone to get back on the carriage and leave while they still had the chance, but everyone looked terrified and began staring at one another. All of them said they did not want to ride in the same carriage as the young princess. The three were asked to go ahead, while the others planned to leave only after their carriage was out of sight. Marie was furious and asked if they knew who the young woman in front of them was, but they did not care who she was and were only afraid for their lives, so they refused to put it online for someone they did not even know. Arya stopped her and agreed they should go ahead. She asked Marie to take care of the carriage, and as for Licht, she had something to discuss with him, so the three of them took a carriage and left. While they were on their way, he kept looking out the window, and when someone nearby asked if he was still worried about what was happening outside, he nodded and said he wasn't in the mood to enjoy the scenery. Putting that aside, he asked why those men were trying to kidnap her instead of simply killing the princess. This was not the same as kidnapping the daughters of low-ranking nobles or merchants for a large ransom. She was a princess, and even if they got the ransom, they would be hunted for life and escape would be nearly impossible. He thought only a fool or someone with great power would scheme like that, and if anyone truly had that power, they would be on par with the king. And Harya, instead of answering his questions, smiled, changed the subject, and said she wished they had met him sooner. That way she might have eased Marie's burden a little, and because she felt meeting a divine sword wielder was fate, she asked what he planned to do once he reached the northern city. Noticing she was avoiding his questions, he asked if she still expected him to guard her once they reached the city, and she said yes. She explained she could not tell him what he wanted to know because doing so would put his life in danger, and he did not argue further. After he understood her point, he agreed not to bring it up again, which greatly relieved her. Apologizing for keeping him in the dark, she said it couldn't be helped. At last the three reached their destination, the northern city. They all got off the carriage and were ready to part ways, but before they left, Arya asked if he would stay in town for a while, and he confirmed he would because he planned to register with the Adventurers Guild. Given the situation, Arya quickly wrote a letter and asked him to take it with him. The princess's own letter of recommendation convinced her he would not be turned away. He accepted it and thanked her. She told him there was no need to thank her, since it was the least she could do for him. The divine sword was pleased to see how kind the young princess was and even wrote a letter of recommendation without being asked. As he left, Turfing asked why he had declined the princess's invitation to stay by their side. He replied that he didn't want a powerful person to use him just because of his skills. From the moment he dropped the Estark name, he decided to live free of those ties and refused to get trapped that way again. With her at his side, he felt he needed no one else, and she began teasing him, asking if this was a love confession. Marie stood there as he walked away, wondering whether they should really just let him go like that. Arya joked that she might be starting to like him, and she said she did not hate him, only that she did not want someone with an uncertain background getting too close to the young princess. Her only duty was to be both shield and sword for the area, and even when others resented her for it, she would not back down and would keep meddling. Arya didn't mind at all. In fact, she'd been counting on her too, and now that there was no point in lingering there, she reminded her they had come to this city for a reason. Both decided to move forward and fulfill their mission. Meanwhile, Lick found an inn and lay down on the bed to rest for a while. Turfing asked if he was going to the guild now, and Lick said he would think about it tomorrow. With more than enough funds on hand, he saw no need to hurry because he had already planned for the future. Starting tomorrow things would get busy, so for now he wanted to rest. He fell asleep immediately, and Turfing was surprised at how quickly it happened. In the end, she remembered he was still only a 15-year-old boy and practically a baby to her, so she let him rest and went to rest herself. In the middle of the night, Turfing noticed someone had entered their room through the window. Trying to wake Licht, she warned him there was an intruder in the room. He didn't move it at all. It was Marie, and she sat down next to him. She already knew he was awake because he always noticed the moment someone entered his room, and she saw he did not resist when she threw herself onto him. She asked if he would accept her purity, and he finally opened his eyes. He pushed her away and demanded to know what she thought she was doing, and what she hoped to gain by acting like a bad person. Suspecting she stood to gain something from all this, he asked her what it was. In the end, she admitted she couldn't afford to pay him, and this was the only way she could think to repay him. Acting tough, she told him he could do whatever he wanted with her, and that she wouldn't stop him. Suddenly, she began to cry, revealing she was only putting on an act. He asked her not to cry and to wipe the tears from her face. Seeing a woman cry in front of him was unbearable because of his entire childhood. Seeing his mother cry alone always hurt him. Just thinking about it made his head hurt. Marie asked if he was okay and whether something was wrong, then he suddenly hugged her tightly. He held her a bit too tightly, and she asked him to stop because it was starting to hurt. Then she noticed he was trembling. He kept repeating the same word, and Marie still did not understand what was happening to him. She hugged him and said everything would be okay, because she stood right beside him. When he finally calmed down, he felt embarrassed, and the divine sword teased him, congratulating him that from today he had finally become a man. He told her he hadn't taken her purity yet, and Turfing asked if he was even interested in her. She began to think he had no interest in women because he didn't react when he saw them naked, and he said he wasn't completely uninterested in women. He got used to seeing his sister's body when he would sneak into bed and rest with her, and Turfing commented that it was a controversial statement. After hearing that, Marie asked who he was talking to, and when he turned she saw the cold look on his face. She asked if he was angry that she had entered his room without permission and reminded him he had already seen her half naked so they were even. Smiling, he told her to save that beautiful skin for her future husband. When asked who he was talking to, he said he was speaking with his divine sword, a Estark family heirloom only he could hear, and Marie was puzzled he could communicate with it, but even more struck that he had mentioned the Estark name. Until a few days ago he had been one of the Estarks, he told her, but now he was an ordinary person, exiled from the Estark family. She asked whether Tisius von Estark was his father, and he confirmed it. Tisius Estark had been a celebrated hero since the founding of Ladacris and served as the royal family's protector. People called him the strongest swordsman and an undefeated general. Learning that Licht was actually his son made it clear why he was so strong, and she found herself wanting him by their side even more now. He asked why she was being targeted along with the princess, since he'd heard the Connors were not involved in royal affairs, and a princess should have royal knights to protect her, so he wondered why they had no guards. On top of that, he had more questions, such as why Arya was out here and who wanted her dead. He had already revealed his true identity and urged her to at least share something about herself. Marie, meanwhile, simply asked what he planned to do now that he knew all that. He pointed at her and said it was only 15 centimeters from the tip of her left chest, and she had multiple scars on her lower abdomen. She flushed with embarrassment and asked him why he was staring when he had seemed uninterested just moments before. Those scars came from protecting the young princess. Accusing him of staring without consent, she called him a perverted creep, while he told her he admired her loyalty to Arya and believed her noble spirit would not be outdone by any knight. He realized it was not like her to use her body to ask for help, and she told him to be quiet, saying it was none of his concern. He realized she must be desperate to rely on a powerless commoner like him. Because of that, he decided not to let them go home alone. Not a noble or a knight, he still refused to abandon a crying woman because he believed a man who would do that was lower than a common beast. Smiling, Mary admitted she had been wrong about him, and as Arya had said, he was a very kind person. To answer his questions, she finally told him that even she did not know all the details because she had done it all on her own. She demanded his promise that he would not tell Arya about today, or she would tell her how he lost his composure after seeing a woman naked in front of him, and he insisted it was not her skin that flustered him. It didn't matter, so she asked him to follow her because it was time to tell him everything he wanted to know. Walking together, he noticed how empty the streets were, which was odd since they were usually busy by day. Marie explained they were in the Holy District, where many devout people lived. People liked them and they walked around a lot during the day, but she guessed they probably did not go outside at night, and she also told him that Ice Hill was the only place where the bishop of the Ladacris Holy Church had judicial authority, which was completely untouched by the nobility. Once he heard that, it became clear why they chose this city, and that, despite their noble blood, they disliked the aristocracy. Marie then got to the point and told him that the nobility was targeting the area's life. It turned out the finance minister of the Ledacris kingdom was Lord Baumunk, and when she asked if he knew that man, he confirmed the man was a friend of his father. Lord Bamonk and Laura Stark were prominent figures in the country, with the House of Bamonk known for its governance and the House of Ashtark for its military skill. He wondered whether they were closer than he'd thought, and Marie couldn't say that for sure either. Because of that, his father became a suspect too. He asked whether she could still trust him knowing he was the son of a suspect who was after them. In turn, she asked if he was in cahoots with the bald monk. He said he was not, and that was enough for her. Arya's clear trust in him was enough for her as well. He felt confused and asked her why she trusted her so much. She replied that the young princess actually had a keen eye for people and strong instincts, a rare lifeline for a princess otherwise known for her incompetence and uselessness. As soon as he heard that, he asked her what she meant by that. Finally, she told him that although Arya was the princess of the magical kingdom of Ladakras, she could not use magic. The kingdom of Raidacrest was founded by mages, and people's worth was judged by magical power. Among nobles, a high magical affinity was a status symbol and often decided the choice of heirs, so Lick's mother made him pretend to be incompetent to keep Minerva from getting him. Even in a magical realm, not everyone could harness magic, and noble families sometimes abandoned children who could not use it and labeled them useless. Often, the children were either exiled to prevent them from carrying on native legacies, or they were erased from the record as if they had never existed. This kept happening among the nobles, and it revealed the kingdom's true, ugly darkness. Back in the present, Lit was surprised to learn that the area was one of them, since he'd never heard of a princess deemed useless, and he asked Marie if it was true. Saddened, she confirmed it was true, and assumed someone as talented as him would never understand how these so-called useless kids were treated in this kingdom, not knowing he knew it all too well. He only pretended to be incompetent, so he could bear the others' scorn because he knew it was all a lie, but Arya really could not use magic. He thought about all the things she must have heard, and could not believe she still smiled so beautifully after everything she had been through. Marie added that the princess was not entirely useless, that she possessed the royal magic of her lineage, and that this magic could not be measured by any device. He didn't understand what she meant by magic that couldn't be measured, but then it clicked, and he said it sounded like something from a fairy tale. She reminded him that magic has attributes like fire, water, earth, light, and darkness, and that the normal gauge measures a person's power by those attributes, but since her magic belonged to none, its area was different, and he asked whether she meant her magic had no attribute. She confirmed that this was exactly it, and being attributeless cut her off from the world's magic system, made ordinary magic useless to her, and left her effectively powerless because she lacked other magical elements. Lit still could not believe something like that existed in real life. The divine sword then called him out, said he had met someone without attributes before, and when he realized she meant herself, she explained that the divine sword is special because, unlike ordinary magic swords that activate spells based on the 6 attributes, the divine sword activates the 7th attributeless magic. She told him that attributeless magic belonged only to the gods, and since humans could not understand it, it showed that humanity had not yet reached that level. A few moments later, they reached their destination and stood outside the church. Marie led him inside, and as he looked around, he realized the church grounds were more like a battlefield hospital. He then found an old man who, to his shock, was dead. Marie told him these people were not just refugees and asked him to look at their skin color. Their skin was gray and covered with dragon-like scales, and he finally realized they all had stone scales disease, with Marie in a resting state he was already familiar with. After he admitted he used to hide in the library to read about these things, she assumed he knew about the horrors of the stone scale disease. The skin turns scaly, then hard as stone, and once it reaches the organ's, death is certain. He asked her why she had brought him there in the middle of the night, but then he noticed the area was there too. She helped the sick by bringing them food. Marie told him the young princess was secretly giving food to all of them. Confused, he asked if they had come all the way from the royal capital for such a dangerous task, and she said he was only half right. Her kindness made her help, and the real reason they had come was that the princess had stolen a remedy from the royal pharmacy for them. Seeing how bold she was surprised him, and Murray added that this was exactly why she loved her so much. More importantly, he asked her why they had to steal the medicine, since he thought the king would have given it to them eventually, even if it took a bit longer, to prevent a catastrophe in the kingdom. She said that if no one had diverted the remedies, they would already have arrived, and there would be no need to steal them, and that the princess had been attacked by thieves while carrying them, so he suspected Lord Bamonk might be behind it too. Marie had no solid proof and could not conclude that from mere rumors in the capital, though it was still possible. That was all she had to tell them, so she left him to decide while she went to meet Arya. He looked again at Ario's bright smile. He concluded Bamunk was a greedy minister obsessed with magic, so he could understand why Bamunk desired Arya since she had no attributes, but he was sure Bamunk would not escape punishment for acting against royalty, and with that in mind, he wondered whether he could avoid committing such a grave sin. He finally realized what was really happening. Everything boiled down to Arya being branded useless. The kingdom had countless ways to expel the useless, and he suspected they were trying to strip her of her claim to the throne. Lost in thought, he was approached from behind by an old man who asked if he was the young princess's knight. He was very grateful they were there, and before Licht could even clarify, the old man told him that although they had been waiting endlessly, the medicines never arrived, and this city was falling into despair. Ice Hill was the only city in the kingdom free from noble influence, and because of that its people were always caught up in noble schemes to take control. He was certain the Medicine Delhi existed for the same reason. Although many beautiful sights could be seen from there, the city had stopped functioning after the stone-scale disease outbreak. Without the young princess's medicine, the whole city would have perished, so everyone there saw her as their benefactor. Truly saint-like, she made everyone smile just by being there, even in the worst situations. The old man couldn't help seeing her as the reincarnation of St. Rukia, and Lick stood there silently after hearing that. He still couldn't understand why her smile was so pure or how she stayed so kind to others when life was so hard for her. Thinking about it, he remembered his mother was the same, always smiling, but when she was alone her true feelings came out. He refused to believe someone could exist who would keep smiling after so many hardships, because his mother's death had taught him people could not be that strong. However, one look at her told him she had gone up against everything he'd believed his whole life, and he wondered whether staying with her would ever let him smile like that again. We may want to live for someone else's sake again. Most of all, he wondered whether seeing the world through her eyes would make it look different to him. The old man came up to her and said dawn was coming, asking her to rest now because if she collapsed their god would surely scold him. Marie insisted she needed to rest and let the others handle everything, and because she was clearly exhausted, she agreed and left with Marie. Then, just as she started to go back, Lick approached her, sword in hand, and knelt before her like a knight. He first scolded them both for their foolish actions and asked what they planned to do if they caught the disease, since Marie clearly could not stop her foolish behavior. He wanted to be the one to stop her and protect the young princess by staying at her side. She made it clear she would never abandon the people who were suffering, and he already expected her to say that. So he wanted to be the one to protect someone like her. After giving up the Stark name, he was just a commoner but still pledged his life and his divine sword to the young Princess Arya Rose. Hearing him say he was Pergusli and Esterk left her intrigued, but she did not ask him any questions. With his sword in hand, she agreed to accept him as her knight. Now officially a knight, she wanted to give him a new name, Ice Hill, and he was surprised, remembering how poetic the city's name sounded and feeling he was meant to inherit it since Ice Hill fit him better than Stark. Marie was happy too and resolved to work with him to protect the princess. Suddenly Arya passed out. She fell right into his arms. At first she felt a little scared and worried she might be infected. When they looked closer, both realized she had simply fallen a rest. Even the divine sword was surprised to see she had collapsed during the night award ceremony and understood she must have been very exhausted. Lit said there was truly no one like her, even among the nobles. She began speaking as she rested and thanked him for everything. With that, he was officially the princess's knight. After delivering the medicines to Ice Hill City, the three of them took a carriage toward the royal capital, Lactaris, still far from rest. Lick noticed how quietly she was resting, completely different from his sister, whose snoring grinds his teeth and who won't fall asleep until she hugs him like a pillow. But then he looked at Marie, who also seemed really exhausted, and asked her if she was feeling tired as well. He assured her she could trust him with the night's watch so she could rest, and because the offer appealed to her, she did not argue and accepted his word. Both women were arrested, and he sat there. Even though he could not Vaughn in his name, because he had not yet held a formal ceremony, receiving a new surname from a princess felt like a major step. He knew that if word got out that a member of the STRK family was guarding the princess, it would spark a big misunderstanding, reach Minerva, and draw thieves and assassins she might send, which he wanted to avoid at all costs. Having vowed to protect the princess with his life, he was determined to keep that promise. Looking at Marie resting peacefully, he realized he had never imagined anyone besides his sister would trust him so much. He had never thought about it until he left Esterk, and now he was here. Later, Mary finally woke up and saw Lick already awake and quietly laughing at her. So she asked him if something was wrong, and Lick said that even though he had not met many women, he was relieved to discover his sister was not the only one who looked like a wreck when resting, and the other woman was very much like her. Kiria could not stop laughing, and Marie felt really embarrassed. She shouted at him, saying he had no right to say those things since he fainted after seeing her naked, which left everyone nearby stunned, and he shouted back that it was supposed to be a secret. Laughing, the princess watched them fight and told them to stop since they had reached their destination. Finally, the three of them arrived at the royal capital, Lactaris. At the gate, a long line of people waited to enter the capital, and a guard stopped their carriage, telling them they could not cut the line. Then the driver showed him a letter, and the guard was shocked to see it bore a royal crest. Harry smiled through the window, thanked the guard for his hard work, and encouraged him to keep doing his best at work. Allowing the pass through, he froze at the princess's beauty, while the people in line began yelling at him to hurry the inspection. Lift was surprised by how lively the capital was when he entered, and someone asked if it was his first time in the royal capital, to which he replied that he had actually been there once before with his father. It had happened a long time ago, so he remembered little now, and looking around it was clear 10 years could change a lot, yet the princess said 10 years would change nothing. Her experience had taught her that this country did not like drastic changes at all, and Licht fell silent for a moment. She asked him for some time because she wanted to visit a shop with him, and since they would be in the capital, he needed to pay more attention to how he dressed. They went to a clothing shop where the owner was delighted to see Princess Arya after such a long time, and he asked how she had been and whether she was keeping up with her studies. After she told him she had been catching up on the theory quite well, the owner noticed the man she had brought with her. He was surprised by how handsome he looked. Ari told him she had come to his shop so he could tailor some clothes for him, while Licht kept telling her he didn't want such favors, and the owner also agreed that if he was going to be her knight, he should wear something better. Inspecting the outfit he wore, he could tell it came from the northern country, and for appearance's sake he wanted him to pay more attention to his clothing, otherwise it would embarrass him too. Then he noticed the sword he was carrying. It licked him and then stared, warning him not to do anything shady. The owner saw that, and with just that one look, knew it was a capable protector. Arya added that with him by her side, she was confident she would be safe from her enemies, and she asked him to accompany her to the Royal Academy so he could protect her closely. Stunned, he refused to go to the academy. She reassured him not to worry and promised to pay a generous reward. Then she asked the owner if he could have the uniform ready by the day after tomorrow. When he asked why she was in such a rush, she said she needed to return to the academy by the start of the week. He promised it would be done, and with that her work there was complete. Licht cut her off, grabbed her shoulder, and told her not to push the conversation forward without his consent, since he had never agreed to attend the academy. Then Arya grew frightened and started to cry, asking whether he had been lying when he said he would protect her with everything he had. Stepping back, he told her he had not meant that, and although he would protect her, he would not go to school, while the owner merely called making a lady cry the lowest action. Frozen, he could not think what to do because he had never been good with people who cried, so with no real choice, he agreed to go to the Royal Academy with her, and she was extremely happy. He began to wonder whether her tears were real or just an attempt to persuade him. In any case, he now knew she was very good at winning hearts. Her charm and the allies she had made kept her alive, unlike him, who had only made enemies wherever he went, and since they did not have much time, the owner began taking his measurements, and while he was doing so, Licht asked him to make it a little larger because he was still growing, but the owner reminded him that the princess herself was his sponsor, so he didn't need to worry. He asked Arya whether the academy was still accepting new students, since he had never attended school, and assumed the admissions period had long since ended. She said he did not need to worry because she already had a plan. As they spoke, she had sent Marie with her letter straight to the headmaster. She was sure Marie could handle his admission. He asked if Marie could really negotiate like that with the headmaster himself, and she said Marie was quite talented, and she was sure she would convince him. Later, they left the clothing shop and finally returned to their home in the area. Marie waited for them at the front door. She said everything went smoothly at the academy and did not need to negotiate because they accepted the proposal immediately, which surprised her a little. Arya told him Marie would take him to the guest room and asked him to relax there until dinner. When Marie led him to his room, she sat on his bed first. If he needed anything, Marie said to tell her and she would get it ready. Tell her this room was actually more spacious and comfortable than his room in Estark, and she was glad to hear that. Pointing out that as the princess's protector he was now essentially her equal, she made clear she would no longer give him special treatment as if he were a guest. By seniority she outranked him and said he should show her respect. All jokes aside, she could tell he was wondering why the estate was so small, and he agreed it was not very big. Since Arya was a princess, there were no guards at the gate, and the neighboring estates were much larger, which made him wonder if this had something to do with Arya's incompetence. We clarified that if the current king had fathered a son, the young princess might have stayed in the main palace. Still, the next king of Lactaris would be chosen from the three princesses, and Arya was second in line for the throne. No king had ever lacked magic, so even though she was second in line of succession, they gave her the smallest date to show everyone she would not ascend to the throne, effectively banishing her from the royal palace. Lick asked if Arya intended to take the throne, and she said he should ask the princess directly. She then told him to rest until dinner and left the room. Left alone in the room, he drew the divine sword and noted that she had been unusually quiet today. Turfing mocked him, saying he needed to learn to understand a woman's heart better, since even she sometimes wanted peace and quiet. Setting that aside, she suggested that now that he had the time, he should write the letter to his sister he promised once they settle into their new home. After caring for him for 3 straight days and nights while he was out cold, she would be waiting eagerly for his letter. He agreed she had a point, and though he had never written a letter before, he decided to try and send his sister an update. He began writing a letter describing everything he'd experienced since leaving Estark. Leaving out details about the bandits so she would not worry, he wrote about Marie and the area in detail and said he would now attend the Royal Academy. Although he trusted Ellen to be discreet and keep secrets, he still sealed the letter with magic and sent it by carrier pigeon to stop anyone snooping and taking it before it reached her. 2 days passed quickly. Lick tried on the new clothes specially tailored for him, and Marie said they suited him and told him to go greet the area and show them off. He admitted he was surprised at how quickly she had finished getting ready, since he had expected women to take a long time, and Marie simply bragged that she was an exceptionally skilled maid. He went downstairs to meet Arya, and when she saw him in his new uniform, she told him he looked wonderful in it. He stood speechless while Marie poked him and told him to compliment the princess too. Though he had no experience, he still tried and told her that her beautiful hair color went well with the white uniform, and Arya was really happy to hear that. Noticing his tie was a little messy, she straightened it for him. They were now ready to head to the Royal Academy. In the northern country of Estark, Elen lay on the Lixpt. She missed her brother a lot. At that moment, the carrier pigeon arrived at the window and delivered the letter to her. Reading the whole letter, she learned he was actually going to join the Royal Academy now, and the news shocked her. On the way to the Royal Academy in a carriage, Arya handed in some papers and he, confused, asked whether there would be an exam. He had thought the day would be all classes, but she laughed and reminded him it was Sunday, so there were no classes. Embarrassed, he realized he had completely forgotten the concept of days. Having never lived by the days of the week with the Estarks, he had lost track of them, and even as a traveler he rarely checked a calendar, but now that he was going to be a student, he understood he had to pay attention. Arya told him the exam was merely a formality, since his admission to the Royal Academy was already a done deal, so she reassured him he did not need to take it too seriously. The academy was a 30-minute carriage ride from the lake in the royal capital, and he remembered someone saying there were about 1,000 students, and with staff and caretakers, more than 2,000 people lived there. The population was almost that of a small town, and the students enrolled there were outstanding, drawn from across the nation, both nobles and commoners. Reaching the academy at last, he was stunned by its size and felt nervous. The divine sword asked if it was his first time at school, and he confirmed this, explaining that when he lived with the Estarks, many people did not want him seen in public. He had trouble playing or socializing with kids Pierce's age, so he usually spent his time in the massive library in Astark Castle, and only his sister Ellen stayed by his side, even though she did not like the library. Turfing told him to enjoy school now that he finally had the chance, but he felt uncertain because he was only playing the student while actually serving as the princess's bodyguard. He hadn't come just to have fun, but he admitted that trying something new sounded exciting, and it made him smile. Just then Arya came over and told him she was very happy to see him smiling. Growing a little shy at that, he listened as she asked if he liked the Royal Academy. He had expected schools to be modest and efficient, but this Royal Academy was needlessly vast and lavish, feeling more like a palace than a school. Fully agreeing with his point, she explained that the academy was a special school funded by the royal family itself. The academy used the same winged lion as the royal family's crest, but while the royal crest showed wings spread wide, the Academy's lion kept its wings folded, reflecting the royal family's strong influence. The Academy had a strict hierarchy based on magic, with students ranked by ability as top tier, regular, or low tier, and their uniform always showed their rank. The Royal Academy accepted students regardless of status, but it was not completely fair. Under normal circumstances, his late abilities would have qualified him as a special student, but because he had to make concessions to gain admission, his rank was different, and he was granted 3 badges. In that area, she was an honorary special student. Knowing this, he figured that because she could only use non-elemental magic, she would normally be a lower-tier student. But as an honorary student, he realized she must have been given special treatment because of her lineage. The Academy clearly reflected the royal family's wishes, and with that settled, someone offered to escort me into the exam venue. 3 teachers were waiting for them when they arrived at the classroom. One of them suddenly acted as if a terrible stench had filled the room, blamed Licht for it, and called him a bad commoner. He told him this was no place for lowly trash like him, and asked what tricks he had used to get introduced to the princess. Looking at his face and body, he admitted he was living quite well for a commoner, and then asked whether he had already learned to please a woman at such a young age. Hurry stepped in for him and stopped him right there, telling him to take back those words and apologize. Lick stayed silent and told her there was no need to get angry. He had grown up around people like that and was used to them, so he advised her not to react to their provocation. Smiling, he reassured her that none of it bothered him and she had nothing to worry about. Furious, she knew he was right and making a scene wouldn't be wise, but she refused to let the remark go unpunished. She hoped he felt the same way about her. Then a teacher escorted her outside to wait while the exam continued. Lit stood there as she walked back, wondering why she felt so angry on his behalf. Never cherished in his life, he had never cherished anyone else, and everyone else was insignificant to him, but Arya was different. She was worth saving, even if it meant he had to sacrifice himself. He realized then that they were simply too different. As she was leaving, he stopped her and said that since his mother died, he no longer cared about anything. He ignored what those insignificant people said about him, but if she wanted him to, he'd try to become a better version of himself, and though he couldn't love everyone the way she does, he was her knight. He vowed again to her that he would always protect her with everything he had, not only from thieves and bandits, but also from discrimination and unjust actions. Her face lit up with a big smile, and she was clearly happy to hear it. The teacher told him to settle down quickly because they were about to start the exam, and he remembered how he had always been nothing in a Stark place, but now Arya had given him a new name and somewhere to belong. He was now called Ice Hulk, a knight of the country's second princess, and he wanted everyone to respect the name she had given him. The teacher told him the exam would last 1 hour and 30 minutes and that he should raise his hand when he finished. The teacher stared him down with an intimidating look that shook him a little, and determined to show that biased idiot the true power of Arya Rose's knight, he began writing the test. A few minutes later, he raised his hand and told the teacher he was done with the test, and the teacher could not believe he had finished already since he had only been working for 10 minutes, and when that racist old man approached, he was sure he had answered carelessly because the test was just a formality. Their goal was to prove a commoner like him was simply incompetent. He chose to grade his paper on the spot, convinced he would start his academy life branded with the lowest score ever. As he checked it, another teacher glanced over the paper too. Recognizing the questions came from this year's university entrance exam, he understood why the old man was losing his mind. After also insisting on preparing the exam questions himself, he noticed he was acting strangely while checking the paper. The old man couldn't believe that Lick had scored 75 points, surpassing the 70-point passing mark, all in just 10 minutes. Arya said this meant his academic level was already at the university level. With the exam over, Lick decided to leave. As the princess's knight, he said he could not let her stay with people like them any longer because their teacher did not even respect the royal family. The remark angered the old man, and he began yelling that even though the boy had managed to excel on the written exam, this was a magic school, and someone without magical talent would struggle to survive there. As he finished speaking, his answer sheet began to glow, leaving all 3 teachers confused. On closer inspection, the old man was shocked to see all the right answers glowing. They formed a word in an ancient script, and then the paper caught fire and burned up. It caught him completely off guard, and he recognized the ancient script as a word that in modern language meant fool. He turned around and left the room. The teacher still could not believe that a mere commoner had figured out the patterns of the ancient script just from the answer sheets. On top of that, the commoner had spotted the university entrance exam question so quickly. The old man had never seen anyone do that before, and he realized Licht was no ordinary commoner, but a cursed child with a monstrous intellect. Walking back together, Arya linked arms with him and thanked him. He felt awkward after that gesture and asked her not to stand so close, saying people would get the wrong idea since a couple of people were already staring, but she didn't care because she knew rumors would spread anyway after he was admitted through her connection. It did not matter because she was sure everyone would soon understand how truly amazing he was. Hearing her talk like that, he said she spoke just like his sister, and she could tell the two of them must have gotten along well. Now that the entrance exam was over, he asked if she was returning to the mansion, and she replied she would not be back for a while because her admission was official and she would start living in the Royal Academy dorms today. Since he didn't know, she told him the Royal Academy was entirely dormitory-based, with students living in one of the 36 dorms on campus, and that his dorm would house male students from the general and lower tiers. He asked if that meant he would be in a different dorm from her, and she nodded, saying she would be in the special student Jules dormitory. That upset him because it would stop him from guarding her, but she assured him he didn't need to worry since special students were allowed attendance, which eased him because it meant he could stay by her side. The Divine Sword agreed that she would much rather have it, since she did not want to be in a place like the boys' dorms. At last they arrived outside the Crescent dorm. They found a young girl sitting under the tree. She asked him if he was the same Licht who was enrolling today. He was surprised to see her, because she was not an ordinary girl but a dwarf. Introducing herself as Setsu, the dorm's cafeteria lady, she said she'd heard from the head of the department that an out-of-season transfer student was coming and asked if the student beside him was his girlfriend. With a straight face he told her he was only her bodyguard. She teased him that if he planned to sneak a girl in for some fun, they should keep it quiet because the walls were thin and sounds could carry into the next room. He stood there thinking this was exactly why one should never listen to a dwarf. Arya blushed deeply. He noticed it and reassured her he would not do anything strange, and she nervously said she was not worried. Setsu knew they wanted to meet the dorm head, so she offered to fetch her since the dorm head usually walked by the lake at this hour, and asked them to wait in the dorm head's office. They entered the dorm while Setsu went to call the dorm head, and Ara noticed he kept staring at her, so she asked if he was interested in Setsu, and he said he kind of was because he rarely saw dwarves doing ordinary jobs like hers. Understanding his curiosity as he was from Stark, she explained that the North was so conservative it might seem unusual to him, but dwarves and elves were common in the royal capital. Skilled people could easily find jobs there, which is why so many came from across the country to work, and Setsu was one example. Bringing up Setsu's earlier remark, he said he and Arya were not lovers, and she agreed, adding that their bond went beyond being lovers. She saw them as closely bonded, each willing to risk their life to protect the other, and that left him speechless. Once again, he realized how kind a princess she was, since he had never heard of an ability that would go so far as to protect a knight. She suddenly stepped very close to him, surprising him, and he asked her if something was wrong. Starting today, she told him to call her only by her first name, no honorifics, just the name everyone close to her uses. Unsure how to respond, he agreed to call her by her first name because you wanted him to. He noticed she used honorifics when saying his name and planned to keep doing it, thinking it came from her upbringing and kindness, but it felt odd that a servant used a casual name while the master spoke respectfully, so he decided to accept it. They reached the dorm head's office and went inside. They were surprised to find the dorm head already inside. She pointed out that at this royal academy, they were the first to walk straight into the dorm head's office without knocking. Arya immediately apologized and explained they thought no one was in there because they had been told to wait in the office. She ignored that and taught them to always knock on the door before entering a room, even if they think no one is around. She wanted them to start over and ordered both of them out of her office. Harry knocked on the door and the dorm head let them in. When they entered, Arya bowed to her and licked, and followed her lead by bowing down as well, while the dorm head pointed out that she had knocked 3 times and asked her if that was intentional. Arya confirmed it was true. She had learned at the royal palace that if they already know someone is in a room, they should knock 3 times on the door. Pleased to hear that, the dorm head could see she really was a princess, but Licht seemed to lack etiquette to her since he was only following Arya's lead. Apologizing to her, he said that growing up in the north his childhood playmates were wild wolves and wolves did not knock. His dormmates understood and told him no second knock was needed, and he replied bluntly, "I know." His slip annoyed her a little, and he quickly apologized and corrected himself, but she was already starting to like him and introduced herself as Jessica von Omunich, head of the Crescent Moon dorms and a lecturer on etiquette. She welcomed Lick into the Royal Academy. She said she'd heard he finished the university entrance exam by answering all the test questions in 10 minutes, and he tried to brush it off as just rumors. In any case, she told him not to focus only on his relationship with the princess. He should carve his own path. She always enjoyed seeing promising young people and had high expectations for him. He bowed and thanked her, and she was pleased because it was a good response. She offered to show them around the dorm, and as they walked the halls, people came out of their rooms, surprised to see a girl joining them who turned out to be the princess herself. Everyone wondered who the man beside her was, and Jessica told him that although the dorm usually had two-person rooms, his midterm transfer meant he would have to stay alone for a while. The first floor was for regular students, the second and third for lower-tier students, and meals, baths, and toilets were all shared, so she told him to get used to communal living. Turfing, as usual, teased him, saying group activities would be almost impossible for him and looked forward to watching. Jessica showed him his room, which had 2 beds, 2 study desks, and a closet he thought would be more than enough. The dorm head was surprised to hear that many students complained about how modest their rooms were, but this student was different. He asked Arya whether lower-tier student rooms looked like this, but she did not know because she had never seen one, and Jessica said it was very different from the special student room she was used to. He noticed his belongings were already inside, and she told him a messenger from the princess had delivered it just a few hours earlier, then asked him to check that everything was there, and he confirmed it. Turfing called them out and told him she could smell someone like her. Another divine sword was nearby. It became clear why the Royal Academy was so famous, and he agreed it would not be surprising to find someone like him there. Turfing began to wonder what would happen if a divine sword user stronger than him showed up who, on the other hand, stayed silent and simply smiled. Arya noticed he was talking to his sword again, and at first Jessica didn't understand, but when she looked closer at the sword, she realized what was happening. At that moment, she saw Arya step into his room and stopped her, telling her an unmarried woman should not enter a boy's room and sending her back to her room. It was time for lunch, so she told them the cafeteria was in the building past the west exit. They headed to the cafeteria and found Setsu again, who was preparing meals for everyone. Glad Licht could join, Setsu announced Licht as a transfer student, which had everyone there gossiping about why a transfer had come at this time of year. Noticing everyone was talking about him, he became annoyed and asked Setsu to lower her voice because he did not like standing out, and she apologized for making him uncomfortable and gave him an extra bread to make up for it. She told him that if he ever needed help with anything, he could always come to her, and she would do her best to help him, and Lick appreciated that a lot. Picking up his plate, he walked back thinking that even though he had only met her once, the dwarf felt familiar and he did not feel bad about it. Before he met Arya, no one had really tried to get close to him. People from Stark and those around him had always kept their distance, but now things were starting to look different. Just as he was thinking that, a group of men came up and kicked the chair he was about to sit on. They were typical bullies who wanted to teach him the rules because he was new there, one of which was that lower-tier students like him were inferior and had to eat standing, and Licht was not surprised at all since these were the kind of people he had dealt with his whole life. Refusing to listen, he said he could not eat like that because he'd been raised with dignity, which angered them and led them to ask if he was defying them. At that moment, Setsu ran up and asked why they were making such a scene. Their leader ordered his men to handle her. They grabbed her and took her away. The bully introduced himself as Vald and said he was the heir of Baron Vald Garland. The man already knew his name was Licht Eichalk, and Licht asked how he had learned it. Val had heard the rumors that he had charmed the princess into enrolling him in this academy, and he believed someone as unrefined as him did not even deserve to hold a sword. Licht asked if he was sure he wanted to declare a duel against him, and that was exactly what Volt wanted. When he learned the other had not taken a practical exam to enter the academy, he let him choose the competition method, and Licht chose waterball magic, which left Bold a bit confused. That explained why he looked so shocked, since waterball magic just makes a ball of water and is one of the most basic spells toddlers learn. It was literally just a water ball, so it barely hurt when it hit someone, and even a child could use it safely, which is why it was listed first in the basic magic repertoire. Val asked why he would want to fight with water ball magic, since even the kids in elementary school don't use it anymore. He replied that using attack magic in the academy would be too noisy and would cause him trouble as well. Val finally agreed to his terms and warned him he would force him to crawl on the ground, while Lick stood there thinking that although his opponent seemed like a common bully, being at the Royal Academy meant he could still be surprisingly powerful. He wasn't worried about him because he knew exactly how powerful people like him were. They were more about talking trash than actually moving, and they blindly trusted whatever was given to them. He'd never seen anyone this strong before, and he was sure it was just another one of those cases. Vol had just finished creating a water ball and boasted about its size, saying only a few regular students could make one that large. Seeing a regular student's strength firsthand, Lit realized that with that much power it made sense they were so full of themselves and felt they could relax no matter who they met. Vol heard it and dared him to say it again, but he simply formed a small ball of water at his fingertip. Seeing the tiny water ball, Vald mocked him and laughed, saying it showed the clear difference in their talent, then launched his ultimate water ball at him. Spectators concluded he had already won the match. Then Lick launched his water ball toward his as well, and it made contact instantly. The tiny water ball destroyed Vospel completely, leaving him stunned. He could not believe what he had just seen and how it could destroy his massive one. The crowd was stunned and began cheering, because a lower-tier student had beaten a regular for the first time, and Vol grew furious, telling everyone to shut up. Pride in his status as a noble and an ordinary student would not let him lose to a lower-tier commoner. Over time, he began to believe the rumors about him and realized he would disrupt the Royal Academy's discipline, so he resolved to stop that and eliminate him on the spot. Unleashing his fire magic, his specialty, he aimed to turn him into ashes. At that moment, someone stepped in and told them to stop because the duel had already been settled. Lake turned and saw it was just another student. The boy introduced himself as Creed and turned out to be a lower-tier student and a commoner like him. Lick refused flatly, saying he did not need the boy's help, and the boy tried to explain that, despite Lick's strength, he should not underestimate the real power of an ordinary student. Vold, on the other hand, was fired up because with two low-ranking commoners present, he could go all out without holding back, and he was determined to defeat the useless princess's useless knight to win recognition. Creed began to worry because it looked like he was losing his sanity, and if that continued, the entire cafeteria could burn down. However, Lake Puss, concerned with something entirely different, told Vald to take back what he had just said. In an instant, he lunged at him, grabbed his face, and slammed him to the floor. He insisted he would not tolerate anyone insulting the queen because he was her knight. The old man was so terrified, he literally wet his pants, and Jessica arrived and stopped them both. Ordering everyone to behave, she said this was a dining area and told anyone who hadn't eaten to sit down and finish their food and wanted a private conversation with Licht. She pulled him aside and asked what he was doing back there, and he said that as Arya's knight, he couldn't just let a pathetic bully like him insult his lady. That wasn't the main issue. Sensing a strong killing intent in his attack, she told him such intent didn't suit his age and asked whether he had ever killed anyone. He stayed silent. One look at his face told her how foolish the question was. Besides the fact that he had been chosen as the princess's knight at 15, she could tell he must have overcome many trials. Her point was that this place was a school, and she didn't want him to carry everything alone, since it was where he could find friends who would stay by his side, and she advised him to ask friends for help sometimes. Turning around, he found Creed waiting for him with a big smile, which proved her point. That was it for now, so she told him to go back and eat his meal. As he walked back, she thought his outstanding talent would surely make many enemies here, but it would also draw admiration and attract others. Her only hope was that he could cherish those people. The scene shifted to Lancel von Baumunk, the finance minister of the Ratoclus kingdom, as he trained. The Baumung household's butler approached him with some news. A report from the teacher had just arrived saying they had sent a spy to the Royal Academy and that Arya Rose had returned, which meant she had defeated the thieves sent after her. There was more. A knight named Licht Icehulk now accompanied her, and reports said he was a skilled swordsman, yet Baumund had never heard the name and wondered why it was not already well known. The butler also reported the knight had black hair and black eyes and looked about 15, appeared just when a Stark boy was cast out, and although the last name was different, the first name was exactly the same. Beaumont finally understood and began laughing hysterically because the mysterious knight turned out to be Lord Tessis's son, but the butler said it was not yet confirmed. In response, he told him to confirm it then. Some time had passed since the cafeteria incident, and Licht was now training with his sword on the campus grounds outside the dorms. While he did this, the divine sword told him she had been sensing intense stares at them for some time, and it was more than just one or two people. Curious about what she meant by that, he turned and was shocked. A group of girls stared at him, gossiping that he had become popular after the cafeteria incident and that they thought he was hot. Turfing laughed and said they'd found a great spot for morning training, but had accidentally wandered into the girls' dorm backyard, and he was getting tired of all the attention because he just wanted to blend into academy life. Later, he headed to the cafeteria, grabbed a lot of bread, and ate it aggressively, leaving everyone a bit weirded out. Creed was among them too, so he walked over and asked the other man why he had such a huge appetite so early in the morning, then pointed out the girls still staring at him through the windows, which really surprised the man because he had never imagined so many girls would swarm the dorm. It really blew his mind that they were all after the newly enrolled corner boy. He also pointed out that Connor students were usually pushed into a corner of the cafeteria and forced to eat on a strict schedule by those high-ranking bullies. Now they could all eat wherever and whenever they wanted, thanks to him defeating Volg, who sat right across from them and looked furious but knew there was nothing he could do. Creed then said that students like him had always been looked down on and discriminated against by the regular students, and they had gotten used to it. Then Licht arrived, and even though no one had told him to, he challenged an age-old tradition people had accepted without question. Thanks to his duel, he made them all question what they had always thought was common sense. Lake said he was not fighting the bully with that intention, and Creed agreed that might be true, but said there was more to it. He was sure of one thing: the duel had woken everyone up, and he appreciated it. At that moment, a girl stepped up behind him and greeted them both. Lick first turned to Creed and asked if girls could use the cafeteria, and Creed said they could not because it was a boys-only cafeteria, but she did not seem to care and noticed how many pieces of bread were on his plate. It seemed the other girls had the same idea, and she was no different, so she showed him the cupcake served in the girls' dorm this morning and wanted to give it to him. There was no reason to refuse such a generous offer, so he gladly accepted it while Cree warned him to take it easy or he would upset his stomach. He told the girl that since this morning Lick had been flooded with offerings from other commoners like her, Lick was surprised to hear the girl was a commoner too. She introduced herself as Hannah and confessed that she had seen him outside her dorm that morning and could not resist meeting him. Ignoring her, he turned away while she felt very embarrassed, and she apologized to him, saying she didn't mean to intrude. Her real interest was his divine sword, and she asked to examine every detail up close. She literally drooled just from looking at it. Turfing was shocked to hear that she was interested in her. Hannah found the divine sword really pretty, with the pure white maid adorned in gold. One look was enough for her to know it was the divine sword Turfing. Word was that the Turthing was the noble family's treasured sword, a Stark from the north, so she wondered why it was there. Lift was in no mood to answer all that. He packed his things and said it was almost time to pick up the princess. He left them and Hannah tried to stop him, asking whether she had said something that offended him, but he gave no answer and walked away. Creed told her she was the only person who had approached him that morning, and it wasn't because of him. Her interest in his sword made her especially intriguing. Later, while Lick walked across campus to meet up with Arya, every woman turned and fell head over heels for him. Turfing was pleased to see her admirers arriving and considered letting Hannah touch her a little, since she was quite famous and everyone wanted a close look. He asked if she was really that famous, and she said yes because it was the sword of the great hero who helped found the nation, but Turfing was still surprised that Hannah could identify her at first sight and figured Hannah must know a lot about history. She might simply have been deeply attached to the divine swords. Finally, he arrived outside the area's dorm. As he reached the gates, the divine sword stopped him and reminded him that this was the girls' dorm. He could not see the problem, so she told him a man should not casually walk into the girls' dorm like that, and he assured her he had no ill intentions, but she said that missed the point and was sure the girls would not want boys to see them in their home. He didn't care about that because he'd seen enough women since he was a child not to begin disliking them, all thanks to his sister Ellen, and with those memories in his mind. Alan simply believed women would not be shy about such things. That had quite literally changed how he saw women's feelings. Arya stood at the gate and heard everything he said, already expecting it, and told him not to enter the girls' dorm like that without permission.